All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Johnny Alcivar. I am the Director of Planning, Research, and Compliance at the Polk County Housing Trust Fund, and I'm joined by my colleague Matt Hagi, who is the Director of Communications and Community Outreach. We are very excited to talk to you today about preservation of federally backed housing in central Iowa. A couple of items that I want to just make sure everybody is aware. We are recording this webinar, which will be shared on our YouTube channel afterwards. And we also have a chance for questions, so please submit your questions along the way. And hopefully we will have some time at the end where we can do a little Q&A, which will be moderated at the end of the presentation. Lastly, I want to thank Katie Patchett, who's the Executive Director of Capital Crossroads, who's also in attendance today, and all of the members of the Capital Crossroads team, committee members, and regional council members who have joined us. We want you all to know that this report aims to be a baseline intended to help with the region's workforce housing needs. So with that, we have a very exciting agenda for you all today. Our new report is live on our website. It can be downloaded at pchdf.org/preservation. We have been working on this report for a while, ever since I started more than a year ago. So it's been a process, and I would like to acknowledge all of the people that have helped us along the way. There are too many to state right now, but they are listed in our report. And at the same time, I will be remiss if I don't talk about the support provided by my colleague along the way and the patients as well. We have very exciting guests with us today, and we're honored and very thankful to have them. They will be part of our presentation as soon as we are wrapping up with our short description of the report. We have Sam Erickson, the CEO of Community Housing Initiatives, and we have Frank Levy, with the CEO as well of the Newberry Living here in the region. Thank you both for joining us. We're really excited to hear the experience that you all bring to the table with the local preservation practices. Last but not least, we also express our our gratitude to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, who have made this report possible and who have also helped us along the way as much as we need it. So thank you. It's a great resource for anyone that's interested in diving a little deeper into the programs that we will look at today, or any other programs that you're interested in with regards to housing. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt for the next slide.
Thanks, Johnny, and thanks everybody for being with us today. It's so good to see you virtually. I can see you logging in, and we're excited to share this report today. First of all, this is just the beginning of some outreach efforts that we're going to have coming up. So today, this is going to be kind of a blizzard of information, and that's okay. We've experienced information overload more than once looking through all these properties, and that's why there's a report, that's why there's a map, that's why there's ongoing details about all of this, so that you'll be able to dig into it yourselves and get in touch with us and continue to improve this project and this offering. Today, I want to start, though, by highlighting a few key themes about why this housing is important in the first place. First of all, we know that this housing is essential because of the relationship between rental assistance and income restricted rents. So this housing in this report is doing two things, usually. First of all, there is a cap on the income of a household that's allowed to live in these units, and that's what we call being income restricted. And then second, in many cases, either the housing provides the resident rental assistance upon move-in, or in the case of LIHTC properties, they would be able, those units will generally accept an outside source of rental assistance, like a Section 8 voucher if a resident has it. And the combination of rental assistance and the income restrictions are very important for serving the most vulnerable people. Second of all, the vast majority of this housing is publicly funded in some way, but privately owned. And so we cannot emphasize enough the absolutely essential nature of partnership with community members, but with property owners and managers to ensure the success of this. And we're going to talk about how we can get in touch over time to keep the conversation going. And finally, we're going to talk about the difference between adding housing and keeping it in a little bit more detail in just a second. But let's dive in. So first of all, everybody knows that I'm a complete broken record about certain topics, one of which is the reality that the people who face the toughest search for a place to live in our community are those who have the fewest resources. You know, the National Low Income Housing Coalition just came out with a new estimate that the wage someone needs to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in our region has now risen to $23.38 an hour. And Johnny, a lot of folks just don't have that amount of income. We're talking about working people, we're talking about families with children, seniors, people with disabilities. We never lose sight of the real human beings that are living at these properties and that need a decent place to live. The chart on this slide shows cost burden from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. We showed this at Housing Symposium last year. You can see that extremely low income folks who generally have household incomes under around $25,000 are the most likely to struggle to afford their rent, which is a condition known as cost burden. About 90% of extremely low income renters are in that situation, which puts them in great financial peril. But you can see that as the income scale rises, the situation improves for folks. And that's why it's so important to think about income restrictions that target lower AMIs, 60% or below, as well as the relationship between rental assistance and income restricted units. We'll go on to the next slide. We have set up an email address where property owners and managers, but really anyone else, can contact Johnny and I with questions about the report or the data in the report. We're happy to show you everything we know about the properties that we include. And we're hoping to have some specific conversations with some owners about questions that we have in the weeks ahead. So you can send any inquiries to our dedicated email, which is preservation@pchtf.org, to get in touch. The whole attitude here is about partnership and learning and trying to make this housing successful. And we know our owners out there are broadly committed to that too, and we're looking forward to talking with you. We'll move on just to talk. One of the things that, you know, is always a challenge in affordable housing, it's very hard to find locations to build new housing, to get through the regulatory approvals that come. The cost of developing housing is rising quickly. So there are a lot of concerns about how to add to this supply. But a lot of times we feel kind of stressed that we're losing sight of, okay, well, what about all of the buildings that have been built? What collectively are they doing and what needs are still out there? So in the introduction of the report, you'll find a list of properties that have what we call exit events by 2030 in the next 5 years, where the property could potentially lose, I emphasize potentially lose, its affordability characteristics. And there are 741 units that are on that list. Johnny and I work very hard to keep track, as we all do here, of units that are in production in the region. We have 837 units in these same programs coming into production. And so you see that the input is greater than the output, but it's important to realize that the more losses we experience, it really cuts into our progress as we're trying to add units. And so we're trying to keep that progress moving forward. Johnny's going to talk a little bit about the key programs that are in the report on the next slide.
Yes, as we dig a little deeper into the report itself, speaking of units, this is kind of a brief summary of what you will encounter within the report. We're talking about 176 properties across the region. These properties, I have to emphasize, are listed as active projects through the multiple spreadsheets that we have used in order to bring this data set together. Now, what that means is we understand that there are properties that have had any of these programs in the past. We're not covering those properties, so any of those that are potentially expired are not part of this, in addition to those that are under construction. As Matt just mentioned, there are a few projects that are coming online within the next few months, within the next year, and those are not part of this project. In addition, we're not including any of the recent awards in the latest rounds of funding. So just want to make sure that we say that these properties are active, they're constructed, they have people living in them right now. The area that we have focused on is our Capital Crossroads region, which includes Polk County, Dallas County, and Warren County. These properties have all been visited by us. So we have been to all of these, and an index of these properties can be found in the report that is now live on our website. So you can see some of the pictures that we have taken at these properties as part of this project. And just to emphasize, many of these projects have served the community for decades. And some of them are newer, we understand that, and some of them are older. But at the end of the day, they provide safety, they provide dignity, and quality of life for thousands of our neighbors. Throughout this presentation, we're going to be referring to AMIs, to area median incomes, and the percentages and the set-asides that some of these projects contain. And I just wanted to make sure that you're all aware of that and you understand what that means. In addition, we know that this is not the full picture, so we will be continuing to work on adding other programs and other local incentives in the future. We want to start with showcasing the main types of preservation risks. And this essentially means how can these properties be lost? How can the affordability that are part of these properties be lost? The properties could remain, but the affordability may be lost. So the three main types: exit risk. I shouldn't say all. Most of the federally backed housing has an expiration date. So they have an expiration date for all of their income restrictions. In some cases, property owners may speed up the process for these requirements to end before that time. And in other cases, those actions may lead to a project leaving those programs early. Affordability extensions may or may not be available prior to the end dates of these programs. So sometimes at the end of these programs, they are lost within that affordability requirement. The other type of risk that's one of the main types is the depreciation type. All homes age. All homes require timely maintenance and eventually larger renovation. In some cases, larger systems such as HVAC, elevators, roof replacements, and essentially new investments are needed. In some situations, what happens with the properties within the affordable programs is that they deteriorate to the point that they can no longer serve as an affordable property. In other cases, past program guidelines or poor management have affected the way that properties are kept in the long term. And lastly, appropriation risks. Appropriation is basically all of these properties, most of these properties rely on that federal funding for maintenance, operations, or to provide rental assistance. And these are set by Congress or other government authorities. And as we know, these subjects are a source of political volatility and budget cuts. So we can't just rely or count on them to continue to be supplied year after year. In addition, these have not kept up with inflation. They have not kept up with the cost of construction and operation that some of these programs require. More importantly, these programs, these appropriations have not been adequate to meet the actual level of demand for people that actually qualify for these programs based on their income. Mm-hmm. We are also cognizant that we're not including other important, very important housing programs. And this is the start. We're scratching the surface, and we will be working on trying to put together a better picture of the affordable housing programs in our region. So these are some of the programs that are not part of this program, of this report: Home Investment Partnership Program, Community Development Block Grant, Section 8 Housing Choice Vouchers, which is another very important federally backed method. However, this method is not tied to specific properties. So it could be used at any rental property that actually accepts them. So that's why one of these, specifically this program, was not part of our report. In addition, we understand that some of the COVID-19 programs that came out as a result of the American Rescue Plan Act had some income restriction requirements. That's also going to be something that we look at in the future, along with local housing programs that are provided by jurisdictions within our region, which include economic development agreements, tax incentive, incentive financing, and any tax abatement that may also be provided in order to provide income restricted housing within the region. We also know that our properties, or non-LIHTC properties that we ourselves haven't funded, are not part of this project. That's something that we have access to and that we will be including in future rounds of this report. Last but not least, we know that naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAH, is another source of affordable housing within our communities. And this is typically older housing, smaller units, or sometimes in poorer conditions that serve a lot of the population that we're talking about today, but don't have any subsidies behind it. We will be taking a closer look at those properties as well in the future. Now that we have put that out of the way, we will be briefly providing an overview of the focus programs of this report, starting with the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which is the most dominant program nationwide. This program was established in 1986, is a program of the U.S. Treasury Department, established by the Reagan administration. All of the properties within this program are privately owned and managed. They have income restricted according to the set-asides, which are the different levels of apartments at different AMIs, or area median incomes, as I said earlier. And the rents are limited to the maximum provided by that area median income. However, they don't come with automatic rental assistance. So that means that some of the residents within these households may be paying more than 30% of their actual income. A lot of the populations, well, most of the population that serve within the low-income housing tax credit, or LIHTC, you will hear it's called, are household incomes at or below 60% of AMI. However, newer properties have the option of selecting an income averaging, which means that as long as the entire property averages 60%, some of the units may be up to 80% of the AMI. It's important to note that recently LIHTC has been used as a rehab tool for older properties within other subsidized properties that may need those repairs or those renovations that we have previously mentioned. Within our region, we have 7 properties that overlap with HUD multifamily programs and LIHTC, and we have 6 properties that overlap with USDA Section 515, which we will cover a little later. In total, we have 135 properties in our region that we count as active projects for the LIHTC program, and many of our regions have at least one project. The majority, we know that they're located in the city of Des Moines, 83 of those projects, or 61% of those projects, followed by 9 in West Des Moines. That's the distant second. But when we take a closer look at the differences for size and population makeup of these cities, we used the population ratio, and that resulted in 28 units per 1,000 residents in Des Moines and 16 units per 1,000 residents in West Des Moines. you can take a closer look at how other cities fared within our report if you download that report today. I'm handing it over to Matt to discuss HUD multifamily.
Thanks, Johnny. You know, the HUD multifamily housing portfolio is one of the original reasons that we got into this project in the first place, because we had some board members here who were concerned about increasing financing needs at older senior serving HUD properties. And we knew we needed to look into the details of the financing of those properties in greater detail. The oldest properties that are in this category are ones that you've probably heard of, like Oak Ridge Neighborhood and River Hills 2, here in the city of Des Moines, where we're at today. These properties it's interesting. Some of them are better known than others, and the location of them, honestly, sometimes they blend in. It's one of the benefits that we've actually driven out and found and looked and considered all of them in person. But you know, River Hills and Oak Ridge trace their origins back to the civil rights era and the legacy of urban renewal programs in the city, which you've heard from this organization before is a complicated legacy. But you know, we pick up the story with the HUD 202 program, which was created to house seniors in 1959, and some of the properties that we have in our database are 202s, others just are designated to serve seniors. I wanted to be clear about that because of the 27 properties that we have in our database across 3 counties, almost all of them are targeted to serve either seniors who are age 62 plus in HUD language or people with disabilities, except for properties like Southwinds, Parkwind, Oak Ridge, River Hills 2, and Meadow Village in Indianola. So most of this housing is serving seniors or people with disabilities. A lot of the current tone for this portfolio of housing was shifted 50 years ago. The Section 8 program came about in 1974, so just celebrated its 50th anniversary. And so many properties that were existing at that time or that were built since have rental assistance that's provided by Section 8 through something called project-based rental assistance. That project, you know, so a lot of older buildings have transitioned to it. About 2 million residents today live in properties across America that have project-based rental assistance. Just to drive this home, the average income of a household nationally in a PRBA unit is $15,455, which is firmly within that extremely low income category that we were talking about earlier. Some of the older buildings that we have in our region were built with PRBRA from the start. Frank Levy is on the call today, who's going to talk about some of them that were in that category that he has worked on, like Corinthian Gardens, or literally right out our window here, Lagudi or Elsie Mason Manor, which is directly behind us. And so you'll hear more about some of these PRBA properties. In 1991, HUD changed its approach to senior. Oh, I wanted to mention also the Section 8 contracts in Iowa are managed by the Iowa Finance Authority, who handles all of the renewals. So we appreciate the conversations we had about them. In 1991, Congress made changes to how senior housing is handled. So the way rental assistance was provided for new senior buildings was changed to what's called a project rental assistance contract, or a PRAC. And at that time, a new program was created called Section 811 Housing for People with Disabilities. And so those tend to be the newer HUD properties that we have in our region. We have 6 properties that have PRACs. Those rental assistance contracts are still managed directly with HUD. There are a lot of concerns about the financial viability of PRAC properties, and folks think they may be better off if they had Section 8 contracts instead of those PRACs in some cases. So today, Sam Erickson from Community Housing Initiatives is going to talk about a project that she worked on called Frank W. Smith Retirement Center, which is the first rental assistance demonstration to convert a PRAC. And so she'll get into more details about what that means, but that property just ended its renovation up in Beaverdale. So we'll see some details of what that looks like. And the HUD portfolio does continue to evolve. We think of these properties as older properties, but AHEPA management company is about to open a property called 192 Phase 4 down by Southridge Mall. The grand opening is probably going to be this October, Johnny. And I think next year going to take a look at USDA rural development housing.
That is correct. USDA rural development is a lesser known program, and unless you've been paying attention to the news lately, So rural development is which I'll get to in a second. Rural development is a division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA. It provided programs for rural rental assistance. So Section 515 made loans in order for developers to build housing for very low or moderate income populations for rural residents, typically at or below 80% AMI. Recently, one of our neighbors, the University of Minnesota, had a study, and they looked at some of the properties within Iowa in this program. And they came up with some interesting information that 90% of the residents at these properties have incomes that are less than 50% of the AMI. And 50% of the households or the residents in these households are senior individuals or people with disabilities. Now, one thing to point out is that the Section 515 program does not come with rental assistance. However, rural development provides a different program, which is Section 521, that's attached to most of the programs, most of the 515 projects, and that provides rental assistance, which caps rents at 30% of the residents. It's interesting that in our region, the number of units within Section 515 is actually more than the number of public housing units. So that's an interesting fact that not a lot of people are aware of. But as I mentioned, some of these Section 515 properties may not have the Section 521, which is the rental assistance. So that means that some of the tenants may be paying below the market rate rent, but do not receive that rent assistance. So the income, the amount of the income that they pay, their income that they pay for rent, may be more than the 30% that we consider affordable.
In those, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I mentioned, if you have been paying attention to the news, recently our own representative here, Representative Nunn, and the Representative Clover from Missouri have announced a bipartisan reintroduction of the Rural Housing Service Reform Act, which focuses on modernizing this specific program. So if you have seen that in the news, this is the program that they're referencing. I'm going to hand it over to Matt as he discusses a little bit more about public housing.
So the USDA properties obviously are overwhelmingly clustered in outer communities, so Grimes, Bondurant, Altoona, Adel, etc. But public housing in Polk County is exclusively within the city of Des Moines, where it's managed by the Des Moines Municipal Housing Authority. Our housing authority serving many surrounding counties is called the Central Iowa Regional Housing Authority, and they currently own 40 properties in Dallas County. They're in several different communities, but most of them are located in the city of Perry. Generally, the trend in the public housing area in our region seems to be of reducing the number of scattered sites, so duplex single-family properties that have been developed by the Public Housing Authority. Those have been transitioned out in batches for a number of years to nonprofits or other affordable housing developers. Generally, the Des Moines Housing Authority is very careful to do that in such a way that the rental assistance and the residents are protected. Rental assistance is maintained in those transitions, but you'll see in the report some details that the Housing Authority here provided us about the continued efforts to transition single-family properties, either to allow the current resident to purchase their home or to transition those homes to Des Moines, Greater Des Moines Habitat for Humanity for eventual sale. So that scattered site portfolio is shrinking. Des Moines public housing now is predominantly the 4 senior buildings that serve seniors age 62 plus. But the building that's probably going to be in the news the most is Royal View Manor, which sits right off of Keogh, south of the interstate, which is the largest and only remaining apartment building for people of all ages that DMMHA manages. Johnny, we mentioned earlier that there's a rental assistance demonstration we're going to talk about for USD, or excuse me, for a HUD project Sam's going to talk about, but you can also do a RAD for public housing. And the DMMHA is pursuing that. As soon as October of this year or fairly soon, that property could be sold to a private developer and managed by them, but the rental assistance will continue and the building will get a renovation. I think now we want to move on. There are a lot of policy implications for that about this project you can find out about in the report, and Johnny wants to highlight some of those.
Yes, we want to make sure that you all have a chance to take a deeper look at the actual text, which goes into detail about these strategies. However, we wanted to provide some overarching themes here, which the demand for affordable housing continues to outpace the supply. And with the federal volatility and budget priorities changing, local support is more important than ever. We envision that this database currently, and as we continue to work on it, will be used as a local preservation tool and as part of planning processes. And we're always happy to collaborate on those solutions. In addition, we want to make sure that people know that what's happening within the regions, what's happening within their specific cities, so that this leads to action, preventative strategies, collaboration, as I just mentioned. Bringing together stakeholders. One of our goals is to communicate with the owners, with the managers, and try to see who wants to prioritize those solutions in order to prevent the loss of affordable housing. Mm-hmm. We want to continue to build upon and expand the scope of this database. As I mentioned, we started with the 4 programs. There are more programs out there. We want to make sure we capture our local programs. And in addition to that, we want to create a comprehensive tool to be used as a development tool. As you can see, you will see here shortly what we mean by that, and make that available to all of the cities within our region, all of the stakeholders that are interested in not only the preservation, but also the creation of new affordable housing. And lastly, we want to focus on finding creative ways of new funding sources, expanding sources that are already existing in existence, because we know that it's not sufficient. As I mentioned previously, inflation, operation, construction costs, maintenance continue to go up, but the funding streams are slowly, if at all, adjusting to those changes. So more is definitely needed. But there's more. There's a lot more detail in our report, and I want to remind you that is currently live. You can use the QR code that's currently on the slide if you want to have a direct way. Otherwise, you can just go to pchtf.org/preservation, and you will find that report along with our exciting mapping tool, which you can use to take a closer look at the actual properties and where they're located and whatnot. It also includes some of the expiration dates. As we mentioned previously, those are the potential expiration dates because there could be solutions to expanding some of these affordability requirements. We encourage you, as well as the property owners, as well as the managers, as well as any other stakeholders, to reach out to us to the email address preservation@pchtf.org. We're more than happy to provide more feedback, answer any questions, and as I mentioned, the work continues. So this is not the end, it's just the start. I will hand it off to Matt as he talks a little bit more about our exciting mapping tool.
Thanks, Johnny. And I want to give a shout out to our executive director, Toby O'Berry, who's on the call with us today. Toby has been a great champion of the ability of this database to provide future planning services for communities and the ways in which we can use mapping to show the data to you. So we're excited about that. I'm just going to show very, very quickly some examples. And just to mention, Sam, you're the developer I'm going to call on first right after these maps. And so we have your slides. We'll be ready to run them. But this is just the note that you're on deck. And then, Frank, we have your slides after that. A little polite reminder. Also, remember, if you have any questions for our part of the presentation, which is kind of wrapping up, feel free to type those into the Q&A tool in teams. We will take questions at the end with the time that we have. So let's look at the map on the screen just to show that to you. This is the overall 3-county area that's represented by the Capitol Crossroads project. And you can see the city boundaries and the different colors of properties that are on the screen. This is the map that you can view if you go to pchtf.org/preservation, where you can zoom in down to a street level and identify where the properties are and learn a little bit more about the programs that they're in, or number of units, expiration dates, or that kind of thing. I will note that in most cases, you're going to find the actual apartment building where the dot is, but in a few cases, some of these properties are scattered site properties, and we do tend to lump them together in groups based on how they're regulated. So there's not literally a dot for every federal backed like literally building on this map, but they're grouped as properties based on their regulatory agreements. So that's how they're on our map. Next, I want to zoom in on Polk County just a little bit and show some of the uses of this data. You can see here what we have on the screen are all of the locations of federally backed housing in general, as well as the Des Moines area transit DART fixed routes. So you can see that there's a real difference between properties that are located on those transit lines versus properties in outer areas that don't have transit access, which is important to consider. DART shares with us that about 2 in 3 people who are on a DART bus are on their way to a job. So the relationship between housing and transit is really very key. Today, I'm going to give a little example, focus on this route right here, which is the 74, which goes up into Urbandale and turns around. I want to keep your eyes on this little bus route where you notice there are no federally backed properties. Recently, the city of Urbandale pursued a competitive status called Thriving Communities that will give them a points advantage for supporting a LIHTC project, low-income housing tax credit project, and they could designate where it is. They have a city-owned property here that is a former hotel that they've applied that status to, and I kind of want to show you using these maps why it's so exciting that that designation got awarded. Here you can see all of the maps just on a kind of with property density in darker, the denser areas in population are darker on this map. And so you can see that by and large, federally backed housing is just located where there are more residents in our region. The area I'm talking about with this Urbandale project has kind of fewer residents, but that's because there are a lot of businesses there that are like in warehousing or light industrial or that type of use. And so if we can go ahead and go on to the next slide. You can see you can't even get for one of the census tracts a rent estimate just because there's not a ton of residences in this area except along Douglas Avenue. But we also know that the highest rents in our community tend to be in these faster growing outer suburban areas stretching from West Des Moines through Clive, Urbandale, Johnston, and into Ankeny, where the median overall rent in the region is now $1,400 a month and climbing. So this has been an area of a lot of growth, but there's a lot of need for housing in that area. And you can move to the last slide. And here you can see that we have, Johnny indicated, I'm going to make my little joke in a second, but Johnny indicated the location of this property. These are jobs paying under $40,000. There are thousands of jobs, including like the Homemakers Warehouse right next to this candidate site. And so I hope you can kind of see how this data allows the comparison of where housing is now to characteristics like transit and rent amounts and population and other factors. And that can provide some insight about where housing will be in the future. So we are excited that Urbandale got this status recently. So the joke on the slide is that Urbandale recently launched a new flag, and you might have seen in Axios, they have all this flag merchandise. So Johnny and I are pleased to buy our new Urby fanny packs celebrating that Urbandale flag, and hopefully one day go to the opening of a new property that's there where housing is really needed. So there's our funny example. And now we're going to allow Sam, if you want to come off mute, we're going to let Sam talk about some of our project examples. While Sam comes off mute, I just want to remind everybody that our project website is live at pch.org/preservation. And then it's my privilege to introduce our good friend and valued colleague, Sam Erickson, the leader of Community Housing Initiatives, an affordable housing nonprofit that serves communities across the state. And she's going to go through a few real world examples of how this actually plays out in real properties. So Sam, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt and Johnny. That was a lot of really good information. It's also scary information. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the definite benefits and and cons or drawbacks, I guess, from trying to preserve this really important housing. Just talk a little bit about community housing initiatives. We are Iowa's largest nonprofit affordable housing provider. We are what I like to call from coast to coast, Council Bluffs to Clinton. So we're in every community, but we do have quite a few properties here in central Iowa, and we're going to talk to them or talk about them a little bit today. So far, we've invested over $275 million in Iowa. As a nonprofit, all the money that we make goes back into just developing more communities and or most recently, we're doing a lot of work preserving communities. Statewide preservation projects that we have done in the past, there's a list here. We've done Ames, Fairfield, quite a few in Spencer. We've gone to Columbus Junction, Sheldon, Forest City. So we have some pretty deep experience with both HUD and USDA, and combining those with the LIHTC program. And I will tell you that both HUD and RD have concentrated quite a bit of effort on making their programs a little more user-friendly with LIHTC. Why are they doing that? Because they understand that their programs are providing important resources for residents, helping with rent. However, there's almost no resources really for rehabilitation and to keep these projects up to code. And as we all know with our homes, real estate just declines naturally. No matter how well we take care of it, there's always the next thing that needs fixed or the next thing that goes out, like your refrigerator, then the washer. So these two programs do understand that there is a real benefit to blending with the LIHTC to try and preserve this important housing. I will also say they have a lot more work to be done. There have been studies and demonstrations, and we're not there yet because there are quite a few rubs in trying to make these programs work with LIHTC. And I will say that the Iowa Finance Authority LIHTC teams have been amazing, bending as much as they can to try and accommodate these federal programs, which are obviously harder to bend when somebody needs to give. So the IFA team has been an incredible, valuable partner in helping us do that. You can go ahead to the next one. Metro area preservation projects that we have done just in the last 4 years. The Frank Smith Center in Beaverdale, which is HUD 202 project base, which I think Matt referred to a little bit earlier. That was actually a PRAC property, and the PRAC contract that they had on that property had not received an income or an increase in about 4 years. And the rent levels there, this is what the federal government was reimbursing them, was about $425 a unit. And so you can imagine what the outcome is then at that point. That is, there was very little investment being put back into that center. A church did own it, a nonprofit board that was started by a church. It was built by a church. They were meticulous stewards of this resource. You could eat off these floors. They did absolutely everything that they can. But in reality, when your operating expenses are $568, per unit and your rent is $425, that math just does not work. And so they called in our organization. They really wanted a nonprofit to preserve this project and to make sure that residents were treated well. So they called us in. But at the time that they did call us in, and this is not an exaggeration, the boiler was being held together with chewing gum and duct tape. That is how 44 units were being heated, was because the maintenance person had created that. Oh gosh, I think my timer just went off, so now you're seeing me in the dark. We're energy efficient over here at Chai. So the second property that we worked with was Adel Manor. That was a USDA project-based 68-unit property in Adel. Same situation. They had a nonprofit board of directors. They had done a wonderful job and were amazing stewards of that resource. But between just escalating costs and also escalating program requirements, this is getting harder, not easier. And that is very daunting for these very good-spirited neighborhood people and nonprofit boards that are trying to make these run. I mean, just at some point, it's just too difficult for them. and especially when you only do one property. So in both cases, they were nonprofits that wanted to turn these properties over to another nonprofit to make sure that the resources continued. And you have to say to their credit, because in both cases, they could have taken these properties out of the program, not preserved them, and then the rental assistance would have been gone for our metro area. So many kudos to them for the work that they did to not only hold these for a long time, but help preserve them. The next slide. So what are some of the preservation opportunities and pitfalls along with doing kind of some of this work? First of all, most importantly is preserving those precious vouchers. Matt and Johnny just talked about how little resources we have and how they continue to dwindle. So I think it should be paramount for all of us who care about affordable housing to try and maintain these. It certainly is for our board of directors. We love to build and create new housing, but our board of directors is now looking at the lack of vouchers that are available, particularly in metro areas, and just preserving these resources has become a high priority, I know, in our strategic plan. It also helps maintain affordable housing options in communities and neighborhoods. We know that it is hard to get a rezone, and when you have affordable housing in Beaverdale, which is a highly desirable neighborhood in this community, it's important to preserve that in that space to make sure that we have diverse communities, as our economically diverse communities. Residents do not have to permanently relocate. I will say one of the most inspiring things to do is to walk in and know that part of this process is to walk in and know that if you hadn't done this, 44 people would not have a place to go. They're all paying based on their income. They're paying, roughly $200 to $300 a month in rent. They had nowhere else to go. And you're going to deliver a rehabilitated unit that is so nice with all these new features to these very deserving folks. So that is fun. Also, we are able to, with the HUD programs particularly, offer a very comprehensive supportive services plan. So when we moved from the PRAC with a rental demonstration, we were able to include resident services. We now have a 0.75 FTE that is on site. They are helping our residents stay stable in their housing. We can help them make sure that they're getting a Medicare Part B that is working for them. They're not paying too much for their Medicare supplement. We can help them sign up for food stamps. We can help them, maybe the Iowa Department of the Blind comes in and helps them do some alterations to their unit, or helps them adapt so that, again, they can age in place and stay in their unit as long as possible. And that benefits our entire system, because we are not seeing people have to go to assisted livings and nursing homes, or worse, having emergency after emergency. Some of the pitfalls. You are dealing with owners or nonprofit boards with a large learning curve. You know that there's a lot of upfront work, making them comfortable, letting them know that this is going to be in good hands, explaining the process, and just walking through with someone who doesn't deal with this on a regular basis. The property, again, a lot of these owners are struggling, so sometimes the property will be out of compliance. Most of the time, the files are out of compliance. I will tell you, there's a big factor in making sure that we get all of that back in line before we start the process. You do have to do a lot of financing layers. There's multiple funding sources. They all have different requirements. Trying to make them play together is always fun. Also, both HUD and RD have multiple unfunded mandates. And so they'll walk in and say, well, what is your plan for this enhanced accessibility feature? Well, the LIHTC program doesn't include funds for that. And so walking in and saying, negotiating that term, well, we can deliver this, but we can't deliver everything on your wish list, HUD, particularly when they don't have money in the deal. It's that's always a fun dance to make it work. The buildings sometimes have been poorly constructed. We see this more with RD properties than we do with HUD properties for some reason. The HUD ones tend to be better built, but some of these rural development properties, you go in to do a rehab. We went into the kitchen and the cabinets came off the wall with the wall. And that, of course, you've gone in, you've done your CNA, you've estimated what it's going to cost to rehabilitate the property, and then you find these little Easter eggs hidden. And you have to then either do more fundraising or figure out how you're going to pay for the unforeseen costs. There are also high upfront costs. I'll talk about that in the next slide a little bit. You have to have a pretty healthy balance sheet before you attack one of these. You have to understand that you're going to put a lot of money up front and get paid much, much later. And that's just a key part of the planning process. A little bit here about the Adel Manor development cost budget. There are always things in there. Some of the non-LIHTC things, a tenant increase protection fund. That's something that RD wanted to see. IFA doesn't let you plan for necessarily with the tax credits. And there are a few other line items. Similarly, for the LIHTC program, we want to have cameras. That's not something that RD has in their budget planning process. And so again, just to talk a little bit about how you have to do that negotiation and make both programs work together. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. The project schedule, I talked a little bit about how how long this can take and how much money you're putting in on the front end before you ever get any repayment on the back end. The Frank Smith Center in Beaverdale, the board approached us in December. Again, we had a boiler that was failing. We did secure a project option in January. Less than 60 days later, we started the RAD for PRAC process to get that going with HUD. We, a month later, put in a tax credit application. We were awarded. It took a full year for HUD to approve our HAP rent increase. And then at that point, the payments were frozen as it worked through the HUD budget process. One of the fun things I like to tell is there's one person in the United States of America that can give you the password to the track system where you turn in your where you put in your monthly vouchers and your claims to the federal government. One person. That person was not available for 2 months. And then when that person was available, that person had to send it through the United States Postal Service. So we waited for that for several months. And what happens during that time? Your residents are paying their $200 portion of the rent. However, HUD is not paying you. And so if you look at this timeline, it actually took us almost a year for HUD to pay us. I believe HUD owed us over $200,000 at one point. Sorry. Keeping going. Resident challenges are another thing. You're walking in, it is change, and there is always a fear of change. It is very important that you assign staff who know what they're doing and that they are working with residents at all times. You also will have to deal with residents' families, for example. If you have a senior person, they're going to want to bring in family members who also want to be informed. So communication is key in these. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take more time. I will go ahead and turn this over to Frank. I know we're running short.
Thank you, Sam. We're so excited for you, though, that both of these projects were successfully completed. I think it speaks to the importance of working with experienced developer team members who can learn and kind of plan for some of these challenges because it's not your first rodeo. Another one of our very talented local developer partners is Frank Levy. Frank, we're monitoring your buildings for you because we look at them outside of our office windows constantly. But we're excited to hear from you a little bit more detail on what you've been up to and you've experienced. And we'll see if Frank comes off mute.
We may have lost him.
We may have lost Frank. Well, yeah. Well, Sam, we had a question come in. I wonder if we can talk about one of the questions that we had come in, and we'll see if Frank comes back to us. We don't have any messages from him, so unfortunately, The main takeaway, I think Frank's stories are going to be kind of similar, but you're going to hear about, Lagudi is right outside of our window, and Elsie Mason Manor is right behind us that received LIHTC redevelopments closer to 2011. He also was really involved in helping Oak Ridge to achieve a LIHTC recapitalization, as well as Corinthian Gardens, which is on University, close to Primary Healthcare, around 12th and University. Another really important HUD subsidized project. One of the questions that we did have come in is some excitement from our friend Katie about this.
Back. I am back.
Frank. Good, Frank. We'll get to the question in just a second. Frank, we were just saying how much we love you and we love looking at your buildings out our window. And we wondered if you had any comments to offer us today. Thanks so much for your efforts, Frank.
I hadn't gone away. It's just that my mic was disabled and I couldn't reactivate it without leaving and joining.
Thank you for your perseverance.
No problem. And thank you for the tee up. I want to know whether the Frank Smith Center is so well occupied because of Sam and her team's great work, or because it's walking distance from Snooki's. She's unable to reply, so I'll just let it.
It's definitely the ice cream, but the Fairway Meat Store is also a big draw. Nice. The residents love that Fairway demonstration meat store as well.
Nice. Okay. Well, thanks for including me in this webinar. Our firm has also been involved in the overlay of tax credits on top of HUD subsidized projects. We've also done LIHTC over USDA in other markets, but here in Des Moines, we've worked on Lagudi Tower, as you said, Matt, right outside your window, Elsie Manor, Corinthian Gardens, and Oak Ridge. All 4 of those properties are with not-for-profit partners. So whereas Sam and her team are themselves a not-for-profit, an alternate direction that a not-for-profit can go is to partner with a for-profit and maintain ownership and control of the project. We've worked on 4 projects here in Des Moines, 5 others elsewhere in Iowa. 8 of the 9 projects were with a 9% LIHTC program. 1 was with the 4% LIHTC program, that's in Ames, and 8 of the 9 were with nonprofit owners, and 1 of them was on our own account. Next slide. As Sam explained in great detail, complexity is the norm. To build upon some of the complexities that she encountered and the challenges she encountered at Elsie Manor, we got involved when the project was embroiled in a bedbug lawsuit, so extricating it from that was our first challenge. We also, like Sam, had a long HUD approval timeline, which necessitated something called a 2-step closing. I'll try and speed up, Matt. The project had 9 funding sources, each of which has its own closing team, resulting in a total of 15 attorneys on the closing. We added that additional elevator on the building, that picture on the bottom that shows the letter E coming down the building. That's an externally applied elevator that we added. We had some challenges involving video and nurse call requirements that we solved with some cool technology. Next slide. There's a wide variety of permanent debt product choices in this arena. We've used each of those pictured on this page. We've used a HUD 221D4 loan with Lagudi, a HUD 223F loan with Elsie. Those were both initiated by Greystone. We've used a Freddie Mac loan, most recently in Ames. We've used conventional debt with Bankers Trust, Community Savings Bank, Citigroup, West Bank, amongst others. And then something, a really interesting tool that many people don't know about is something called IFF, originally known as the Illinois Facility Fund. They provided some really creative financing for some of our projects. And then, of course, the Iowa Finance Authority itself has provided some of our financing. And as Sam alluded to, you have these not-for-profit boards that require a lot of education, resulting in them being sort of one of your customer groups, if you will. The other stakeholders are the residents themselves, of course, investors and agencies. So when you're in this arena, you wind up having a lot of stakeholders to serve and please. And that's the end of my presentation.
Well, Frank and Sam, thank you both so much for being part of this. I think, yeah, right. We look right at the elevator that you had to apply, Frank. I think Sam mentioned some of the emergency protection devices. So there have to be in some of these properties a pull cord in every bathroom that allows someone who's experiencing a health situation to summon support. And those technical challenges can be really significant, maintaining those systems that in some cases were never designed to last this long. And I mean, it's just, it goes on and on the list of things that people would never have thought of in terms of how complex these conversions can be. Katie did ask, I think, a good question. I want to just let you both comment on it before we fully wrap up today, which is just if you had to speak with local government leaders based on the work of preservation that you've done, and there were just any messages that you wanted to send directly to local officials or community members specifically about preservation, do either of you want to offer kind of a final thought on what you'd like them to take away from the work that you've done?
I've got something to add. When
Go
a
ahead.
city is contemplating exiting a public housing project, if they are opting to maximize the sale value at closing, they're likely trading that off against ongoing staffing and capital repairs budget, because there's no free lunch and there's really no cheap way to operate these complexes. And so whatever dollars the city is going to get today, they're going to be giving back in terms of police calls and complaints in the future. So I just encourage cities, any cities that might be on this call, and when thinking about public housing, and Royal View Manor came up before, that they think about the life cycle, the total life cycle of a project and the impact of the neighborhood of a well-run project.
Thank you, Frank. That's always on people's minds. Sam, I don't know if you had a closing comment or message for local folks. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I would just say that also looking at some codes and requirements and inspections if a local community can become part of this process and look at the requirements that are everywhere else and not add to it, but also try and maintain some flexibility so that when we are doing inspections and taking parades of people through these properties, that they, rather than having us staff a separate day and a separate preparation, could, to the extent that they can partner and make any of this easier, it is most welcome. And it benefits everyone involved.
I couldn't agree more with that. Sam, Frank, thank you so much for being part of this event today. Everyone, you can download the report now and get more details about this effort at pchtf.org/preservation. There are more preservation needs and success stories that we need to write across our communities. But as you can see, it's a challenge where we have to take this seriously, and we have to be willing to partner, to listen, and to look at the unique circumstances of every property. If we can achieve that, not only can we add housing solutions that people need, but we can also maintain those housing units and the stability of those residents for the long term. On behalf of the whole Polk County Housing Trust Fund team, my colleague Johnny and myself, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be following up in an email with another opportunity for you to share your feedback today, and you can look for this recording in a couple of days on our YouTube channel. Thank you all so much.